In this video, we're looking at the annual letter to shareholders of the fund Smith. This is the fund that is run by Terry Smith. He's the famous British investor that I follow. He has a history of beating the S&P 500. So this is his 13th annual letter to shareholders. So first, we will look at the fund's performance. We will compare the performance to the S&P 500. Secondly, we will look at the top gainers and top losers of the fund. We will look at some of the numbers of the fund. For example, we will look at the free cash flow that is generated by the companies in the fund. And lastly, we will look at what stocks Terry Smith sold and what stocks he bought during the last year, during the 2022 year. So let's get started. First of all, this is based on the annual letter to shareholders. 39 filings with the exact numbers of the fourth quarter will be available in about a month. If you want to get updates, please consider subscribing and you will not miss any new videos. Okay, Terry Smith is a famous British investor that I follow. His famous motto is buy great companies, don't overpay, and do nothing. He is the author of the book Investing for Growth, which compiles his annual letter to shareholders. He has managed to beat the S&P 500. So this is the history of the fund's performance for the last 11 years. As we can see, for the previous year, the performance was negative 13.8%. So yes, the fund has negative performance for the last year, but he managed to outperform the S&P for about 4%. In his annual letter to shareholders, he compares his performance to the MSCI World Index. But what I really like to see is the comparison to the S&P 500. So on average, S&P for the last 11 years brought around 14% per year. So this is on average, while the fund on average brought around 16.5%. So as we can see, the fund managed to outperform the S&P 500 for the last 11 years. On average, the outperformance is about 2.5%. Okay, how the portfolio of Terry Smith looks like. As we can see, his portfolio is centered around 20 core positions. They represent 3 or more % of the portfolio. He has other positions, but they represent much smaller percentage of the portfolio. Okay, so what were the main losers of the fund during the last year? As we can see, these are the main losers of the fund. So Meta platforms, PayPal, Microsoft and Amazon. A lot of stocks from technology sector. So right now, technology companies have lower valuation because of the higher rates. They also repurpose their spendings on their main areas. For example, the search for Google, not other bets. But many companies have problems of its own. For example, Meta platforms, investing in the metaverse. The result of that investment is unknown. Or PayPal, which has questionable acquisitions. So this is something that he writes in his annual letter to shareholders. Highly encourage you to read it. While the main gainers of the fund were defensive names like Philip Morris, Pepsi, or Mettler Toledo, which makes medical devices, so more defensive types of stocks. If you look at his companies by sector, we can see that he has the most companies from consumer staples sector, but he also has around 20% from technology and healthcare sector. In the recent quarters, he added Google, Amazon, Meta, or even Apple. So many people believe that Fund Smith is becoming a technology fund, but this is not the case. Around 20% of his portfolio is in technology sector, maybe more if we consider Amazon or Google from technology sector, because technically speaking, Google is from communication services sector. So again, only 20% of his portfolio in technology companies. Okay, let's look at some of the numbers of the fund. So if a fund was a company, how much free cash flow did it have? So in the previous year, the free cash flow of the companies of the fund, the free cash flow increased about 1%, while the free cash flow of the S&P 500 companies decreased 4%. So this year is unusual. In 2021, the after-COVID year, the free cash flow increased around 20%. So the free cash flow increased dramatically after the COVID, and right now it only increased about 1%. So usually the free cash flow increased in high single digits. So this is the more normal free cash flow increase. So on average, the free cash flow increase of around 8 or 9% is something to be expected in the future. Okay, so what were the main changes to his portfolio during the year? So again, this is the statistics for 2022. So for the whole year, we don't know what happened in the fourth quarter because the 13F filings are not available yet. They will be available in about a month. So Terry Smith writes that he reduced his position in J&J, Starbucks, Intuit, and PayPal. So for Johnson & Johnson, he sold almost everything in the first quarter. Right now, his portfolio has only a very small position in Johnson & Johnson. So he sold almost everything in the first quarter. Starbucks, he sold everything in the second quarter, but he reduced his position in the first quarter. As to Intuit and PayPal, he reduced his position in all of the quarters, in the first, second, and the third quarter. So what stocks he bought? He bought Mettler-Toledo. They produce medical devices. He added Mettler-Toledo in the first, second, and third quarter. Then he purchased Adobe. The most of the purchases were in the first quarter, but he also added in the second and the third quarter. Then he added Otis. They produce elevators. He bought the position in the third quarter. And in the third quarter, he bought Apple, a very small position in Apple. So again, these are the positions that he writes about in his annual letter to shareholders. So he made other changes, but these were the main changes. Okay, let's look at his portfolio that was in the third quarter. So these are his top 20 positions. As we can see, even after the reduction in the position, he still owns Intuit, around 3%. Something tells me that he will reduce this position in the fourth quarter, but we don't know this for sure. And also PayPal has around 2% of his portfolio, even after the reduction. So a very significant portion of his portfolio. So again, just like Intuit, it is very likely that he reduced his position in PayPal too. He sold out Starbucks, and J&J represent only a small portion of his portfolio. Mettler-Toledo International, around 3% of the portfolio. So it is very likely that he added to the position. Adobe also around 3%. Again, something tells me that he will add to his position in Adobe. If you look at the stock chart of Adobe, again, we can see that Terry Smith bought his position in the first quarter. So the price was close to 400. So right now it's possible to buy the stock even at a lower price level that Terry Smith did. Otis, 2% after the third quarter. Also, we can see that Otis or Mettler-Toledo done much better than the S&P 500. So the S&P returned minus 14% during this period, while Mettler-Toledo and Otis done much better. And Apple, he bought only a small position, so it will be very interesting to see if he added to his position in Apple in the fourth quarter. Okay, so we looked at the fund's performance, we looked at some of the numbers of the fund. Also, if you want to know more about Adobe, this is the stock that was bought in the first 3 quarters. Here's the video. If you are not subscribed to the channel, you can just by pressing the button right here. You will not miss a single new video. Thank you very much for watching till the end, and see you in the next video.